So there's been a lot of agitation, really, and a lot of confused coverage about this bill called the CAB, the Citizenship Amendment Bill, which is now the Citizenship Amendment Act since it's been passed. And if I were the Indian government, I actually wouldn't have called this bill citizenship amendment at all, because it doesn't amend anything to do with the citizens of India who are living there. What it really should be called is a minority rehabilitation bill, because this bill is trying to rehabilitate minorities from India's three Muslim neighbors, which is Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. So minorities who've been persecuted in these countries are now being allowed to be Indian citizens. In fact, this bill is only for this act is only for the people who are already in India, the people who fled persecution and are in India. So one of the areas of confusion people are asking is, why is it that it specifically does not mention Muslims? It says that it will apply to Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, Parsis, Christians that are in Pakistan, that have come from Pakistan or Bangladesh or Afghanistan, and they will be given citizenship. And the reason is that you really cannot understand this bill without understanding the context of the partition. Now, the partition is an event that India is unique in the entire history of the world, where India was specifically partitioned to create a Muslim homeland. So in 1947, there was a demand that Muslims need a separate homeland. And when India was getting independence from the British, at the same time, India was partitioned into a Muslim homeland. So at that time, a lot of migration took place. A lot of Hindus, Sikhs, and other minorities that were in the areas which are now Pakistan and Bangladesh migrated to India. And a lot of Muslims at that time migrated to Pakistan. So at that time, the Indian government had promised that, not everybody, it's a huge dislocation. If you look at a traumatic event like a partition, there was a huge dislocation in population. Some people might have been staying there for centuries. Their ancestors might be there, and suddenly they're asked to leave. So especially people who had less resources, the lower class people or poorer people, a lot of them still remained in for instance, a lot of Hindus remained in Pakistan who was not able to actually move during when the partition happened. So the Indian government at that time had assured, and this is the Congress government, Mahatma Gandhi had assured, and Jawaharlal Nehru's Congress cabinet had assured, that even if the minorities of Pakistan wanted to move at a later time, and they were not able to move during immediately that time, but later on they felt uncomfortable or they felt persecuted, India would always welcome them. So this is really the context of how, of the CAA and how it's taking place. Now what happened was that, if you look at a black box, let's say you don't know what is happening inside a country, and you were to determine whether somebody is getting persecuted, you can just measure, are people trying to flee that country? If a particular kind of people are trying to flee a country, which means that those people are being suppressed. So if you look in the case of India, there's almost no Muslims who are fleeing to Pakistan, for instance. It's not happening. But if you look in the reverse case, you have literally hundreds of thousands of Hindus that fled Pakistan for their persecution, and also fled Bangladesh, and we'll come to the Bangladesh story later. So you had thousands of these families who fled, and a lot of them, after they came to India, so they fled because they were being persecuted, but even after they came to India, they actually were still persecuted. Why is that? Because they did not have any citizenship rights. So even though they had fled to India for refuge, because they didn't have any rights, they couldn't work, they couldn't take government jobs, and because they couldn't vote, no politician cared for them. So they had actually been languishing for decades in India without any rights. And so this bill was specifically meant to take care of those people who have actually, the bill specifically states, only people who have come here before 2014, before 31st December 2014, It's only for those people who have been languishing in India without any rights, and this is to give those people rights. And so, as far as why Muslims are excluded from it, this is specifically for the people who are persecuted in India's Muslim majority neighbors, specifically the ones that, Pakistan and Bangladesh, that were formed after the partition of India. So it made absolutely no sense that once a partition has happened, to let back all the Muslims from Pakistan back into India, because the whole premise of the formation of Pakistan is that this is a place which was formed on a demand for a Muslim homeland. So to say that Muslims are being persecuted in Pakistan as a Muslim homeland, firstly, that would be the issue. And of course, there might be some Muslim sects that are persecuted. We'll talk about that later. But because this is happening in the context of the partition where a Muslim majority Pakistan is split up, it wouldn't make sense to have all those Muslims come back to India again. So it is really to an act of humanitarian service to the minorities of Pakistan and Bangladesh and also Afghanistan, which was cleared out. Lakhs of Muslims and Sikh were actually fled from Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. Yeah. Well, firstly, the agitation is due to misinformation, right? So the agitation is because if you look at the kinds of messages that have been created, even in Western media and Indian media, the messages that have been created is that Indian Muslims are being targeted, and there is, quote, a right-wing Hindu government which is targeting Indian Muslims, and it's completely false. There is nothing like that is happening. But because that perception has been created, and also the parties that are in opposition to the government, they are of course orchestrating a lot of this. So there is orchestration by the opposition. Also, there is misinformation which is causing people to protest this bill, this act. Well, India is a very strange secular state. Actually, if you look at the situation in India, far from discriminating against Muslims, the BJP government actually, after coming to power, has created a number of specific schemes that are only for people who are not Hindu. So in the US, this would be completely illegal by the Constitution. For instance, in the US, the federal government could not start a scholarship which is only for Muslims. But the Indian Constitution allows this, and the Indian Constitution has instituted discrimination on the basis of religion. So it has a minority affairs ministry. A minority is defined on the basis of religion, and then it checks and it asks the citizenship, asks the citizen, if you are a Hindu, then you are not entitled to a number of scholarships and schemes that the government of India under the BJP has put together. For instance, if you are a Muslim weaver, then you have a special scheme for weavers. But if you are a Hindu neighbor of that Muslim weaver who's also a weaver, you are not entitled for that special scheme. Similarly, if you are a student, and if you are a Christian student or a Muslim student, the government will give you special scholarships. But if you are neither of those two, then there is no provision under that scheme to give you any scholarship. So, firstly, India's constitution already blatantly discriminates on the basis of religion. This particular bill is actually not about Indian citizens at all. So this particular bill doesn't discriminate or not discriminate for any Indian citizen. This is aimed only at refugees who have fled Muslim majority countries and have come to India. So the Indian Constitution itself, it does discriminate on the basis of religion, but it discriminates against the Hindu population. Whereas this bill is not even targeted at Indian citizens, so the question of discriminating against Indian Muslims doesn't even arise. So in Assam, there was a long agitation, decades long, where number of people, both Hindus and Muslims, fled from Bangladesh, and they had populated vast areas of Assam. And as a result, the Assamese felt that their own language was becoming a minority. The number of Assamese speaking people in those areas were becoming a minority. And there was a lot of resistance to that. So there was a long agitation, and there was an accord that was signed. And also the Supreme Court, there was an accord and the Supreme Court order which said that there will be national registry for citizens that will make sure that they actually track all of the people who are illegal aliens, and they will be tracked and eventually deported. Now, we have to realize that the problem of illegal immigration is something that every country is tackling with in different ways. I mean, people don't realize, but President Obama, deported over 2.5 million illegal immigrants. Now, Prime Minister Modi actually has yet to, yet to deport a single illegal immigrant, but there is a huge furrow over imagined things that the government of India is doing, which has no basis in reality. I think the government will have to act very sensitively. If right now, for instance, the NRC is only applicable to areas in Assam, there is no right now there is no plan to implement it all over India. And when that comes, we'll have to look at exactly what the provision is, what the fine print of it is. But it is true that the government will have to deal with the question very sensitively. If we agree in principle that people who are illegal aliens should be tracked by the government and should be sent back. This is what all other countries do as well. So people who are not fleeing because of persecution, but are simply economic migrants or have come for other reasons illegally into the country, every country has a procedure to identify them and to figure out a plan what to do with them. So India would also have to make a plan if it does that on a nationwide basis. And it will have to do that with certain sensitivity, because it is true that a lot of paperwork, the kind of, we have to find what documents will be required or not required. But again, this is a hypothetical question, because right now there is no nationwide registry of citizens, and there is no, unless we know what such a scheme is going to be in the future, we actually can't really speak about it also.